Thank you for the gift of work. Thank you for the opportunity to meet in public session today, not only to do the business, if you will call it, of the town, but also to be able this evening to recognize one of our very own who epitomizes service to the town of Garner and to our fellow citizens. Guide us and be with us here this evening in the things that we think and say and do, and guide us tomorrow and the next day and the days that follow to do your will and to help our fellow man. For Christ's sake, we ask it. Amen.
Amen. Okay, next on the agenda is petitions and comments. Next time on the agenda, if anyone to address the council on anything not on the agenda. If you wish to address the council, come to the podium, state your name and address, make your comments. State your name and address.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Chris McGinnis, and I'm calling in regard, or actually coming to talk to you in regards to 4408 Jessup Drive, which is my residence, and where we have some disputes which I wanted to address.
State your name and address.
Oh, I apologize. Chris McGinnis, 4408 Jessup Drive. Technically, the address is Raleigh, North Carolina, 27603.
Thank you.
As I said, my name is Chris McGinnis, and I'm a member of the Greenbrier neighborhood, one of the most recent additions. And I'm coming this evening to briefly discuss some of the misunderstandings or false accusations surrounding my residence. I'm hand-delivering you all a copy of a letter that I wrote, which was amended, proofread, and ultimately signed by one of my attorneys, Matthew Cheradini of Cheradini Law. And I can give it to you now or afterwards, whichever you would be happy to do.
Wait till afterwards.
Yes, sir. I've been looking for a home for many years and have dreamed of home ownership for quite some time. After years of planning and 5 months of hardcore searching, I was finally able to secure my dream home at 4408 Jessup Drive. I signed the papers and closed on this home the last days of February of this year and started moving into my home gradually in March. I physically set up residence at this address at the beginning of April 2018. 4408 Jessup was very well taken care of by the former and original owners, Bill and Ruth Gower, who built it in 1960. But I did buy the home as is. So there were ceiling fans that were broken and drywall which needed to be slightly patched and faucets which had worn out, etc. As a result, a friend of mine, a native Garner resident, Tony Reeves, agreed to come and help me around the house getting things fixed. I had almost exclusively spent the previous 5 months looking for a home and had in fact made 9 offers until finally the 10th one came through with 4408 Jessup. Upon starting this search, I was cognizant that I owned several trailers, and a prerequisite to my realtor was that I find a home with no HOA or where the HOA covenants had expired. This was done transparently and honestly, as I openly planned on moving my trailers to the property that I purchased. I exclusively focused every available moment I had searching for a home in the red-hot real estate market of the Triangle. It was a very, very grueling endeavor. As a result, I was extremely behind on everything in my life. In addition, I am a collector of furniture, which is principally American Empire, circa 1810 to 1840. Many of these pieces are very large and had been damaged in the past few moves of my lifetime. As a result, and since I had Tony there to help me, we decided to touch up and repair many of these items before moving them inside my home or one of my 4 patios or porches. As I mentioned in the letter, the move was very chaotic and busy, and I am sincerely sorry if this upset or inconvenienced any of my neighbors. However, both I and my attorney strongly feel these complaints are extremely exaggerated and hyperbolic, if not xenophobic. There seems to be a constant trend of statements or insinuations from members of the Greenbrier community such as, us against him, he's not one of us, and he's different from us. These statements deeply hurt and disturb me. Sadly, this contact with a small minority that I believe of my neighbors in Greenbrier, as well as the town attorney, have reached a point of being prejudicial and harassing. I'm a native North Carolinian whose family goes back to the Revolutionary War. I have always been a proud citizen and active member of my community, and I believe in being an active member of society. As far as I can ascertain, this animosity stems from false allegations that I operate a commercial enterprise from my residence. To be clear, I do not run a commercial business out of my home. My activities at 4408 Jessup Drive do not have any significant adverse impact on the surrounding neighborhood. I do not impede traffic. I create no objectionable nuisance, and I do not display any goods, stock in trade, or other commodities for sale. Anything which could have falsely been construed as public display for sale has been removed. I have been visited by both Officer Wolf and Sergeant Adams of the Garner Police Department regarding placement of the trailers. I have done my very best to expeditiously meet their requests. If they feel further reasonable accommodations need to be made, I am more than happy to work with them. Incidentally, I took pictures of the before and after photos of the placement of these trailers, and as a result of these visitations, and this information was emailed to my attorneys. For these reasons, I feel quite certain that I am in full compliance of the UDO and have adequately addressed the concerns of the notice of violation which I received on June 22nd, 2018. It was written June 19th and appealed on July 18th, 2018. I firmly believe the Board of Adjustment will agree with this assessment and consider this matter closed. Finally, my lawyers and friends urge me to come and speak to you today to introduce myself, not as the hermit or the boogeyman of 448 Jessup Drive that I have been perhaps portrayed as being. My name is Christopher Matthew McGinnis, one of the newest residents of Garner, and I hope someday I can call many of you my neighbors, fellow citizens, and friends. Thank you.
Council member have any questions, comments? Attorney, you have anything?
Oh, no, sir. Later, the clerk will take it.
Yes, sir. Nice to finally meet you in person. There's one for each of you. There's 6 and one additional one. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, Ronnie. One of our citizens has approached me a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, and I invited him to come and speak to us tonight. A lot of the council already knows Kenny Lynch, and I told him I would introduce him. Kenny attends Aversboro Road Baptist Church, and is a member of Special Blessings class. And Kenny, if you would come to the microphone and introduce yourself, and then tell us what you came to say, and I think we would all be interested in hearing it, son.
I'm Kenny Lynch. My address is 105 Tappan Court, Garner, North Carolina. I'm talking about the gym it was on Main Street. Now I see nobody working there, and
Do you and your mom go by there on a frequent basis, Kenny?
yeah. And really, now we see no trucks out there, no workers out there or nothing.
You're wanting to find out when we're going to have it ready for use, because you like to play basketball, I understand.
Yeah.
Well, when Kenny asked me, I said, well, we ask ourselves that question several times, but I thought if it came from one of our citizens asking it, it might help the contractor to excite him, and perhaps he would move along. Is there anything else you'd like to ask us?
No.
Thank you very much for having the courage to come up here and talk to us, Kenny.
Welcome.
Anyone else? Okey dokey. Adoption of the agenda.
Mayor, I move adoption of the agenda as prepared by our town clerk.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, vote by saying aye. All opposed.
I wanted to add a closed session, I'm sorry. I would like to add a closed session to discuss personnel
All right.
issue, and Mr. Anderson, if you give us the statute.
That would be 143 318-11-8-6, and I believe there was also a request to add one on a real estate matter. Is that true? Okay.
No,
Just that
not
one.
from staff.
Okay, all right.
Good. Did we adopt the agenda? Did we get through that?
Well, I'll move that we amend it to include a closed session and move that we adopt the agenda.
All right, very good. Motion made, second. All in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye. All opposed. Look, I'm very pleased to move on to the next part of the agenda, the presentation, which will recognize Amy White as the recipient of the 2018 James R. Stevens Service to Garner. Everybody needs a best friend. Everybody needs somebody who will go with you to the hospital and stay with you until you come home. If you go to jail, somebody who will go to jail with you, make sure you get home. Within this community, in this town, there are many, many people like that. But me tonight, myself and I, are only going to recognize one tonight, one who exceeds everything that we expect, and one who does all these actions to make you feel good. The length of things that Amy White has been involved with through the years, it runs off the paper if you write it down. So I have an award that I'm going to present. I'm going to have Beverly Adams to present it. And then we'll talk to Amy. Committee, I ain't going to run you down. We'll get started.
First of all, I wanted to thank Mayor Williams for asking me to make this presentation. It's my honor. I wanted to thank the Stevens family for making this award possible for the town, and for Rebecca, that's on the town staff, for kind of holding our committee together, and to recognize that it was a selection process where there was a number of nominees, and so Amy, you should feel especially honored to receive it. Mayor Williams was on that committee, Ken Marshburn, Jeanette Stevens, Neil Pageant, and Judy Bass. I hope I haven't left anybody out, but it was a selection process. And I just had a few things I'd like to say. A lot of things were said to Amy upstairs at the reception, and I don't have a whole lot more to say, but I think you can look no further to see the true definition of service to mankind, community, and state than Amy Bannister White. For most of her life, she's been dedicating to helping others, especially in Garner. Amy is the hands-on leader of Community Hope, a Christian nonprofit organization that has grown from a one-time federal grant for tutoring at-risk children into a self-sustaining program with 8 different ministries. Amy would be an extraordinary recipient of the James R. Stevens Service to Garner Award if she had done nothing other than nurture Community of Hope. But long before she helped begin Community of Hope Ministry, she had devoted her life to service to the community and the state. She is a graduate of Garner Magnet High School and Wake Forest University. She served on the Wake County School Board of Education and was vice president of the Garner Chamber of Commerce. She is a past chair of the Garner Education Foundation. She served on the boards of the Wake Education Partnership, the YMCA, Capital Steering Committee, the North Carolina Commission on Volunteerism and Community Service, and was appointed by Governor Pat McCrory to serve a 7-year term on the State Board of Education. I believe you're still serving that term. Amy has been recognized as one of the most effective leaders in the area, with Triangle East magazine selecting her as one of the outstanding businesswomen in the area, and the News and Observer naming her as Tar Heel of the Week. Quite honors. This only touches the surface of her service. In addition, she sings in the sanctuary choir at First Baptist Church, and if you ever heard her sing, she sings like an angel. Amy's work in Garner has made a long-lasting contribution to the betterment of Garner. She is a worthy recipient of the town's greatest honor, the James Stevens Award. Congratulations, Amy.
You can do it.
Right there. Right there.
Left it over on the
podium's yours, he said.
Well, having had the opportunity to present in many meetings such as this, I know that long-winded comments will prevent you from getting out of here in a timely manner. So I will simply add to the comments that I mentioned upstairs. First, a giant thank you to the Stevens family. The fact that a family who has a legacy of service would provide an opportunity for an award for this town or for folks who work in this town is an incredible honor. I looked at the list of those who have been previously selected, and I consider myself in great stead for many, many folks who have served before me. I shared with several that my husband's grandmother turned 100 last Friday, and I'm 50, and I sort of feel like hashtag I still have a lot to do. So I want to thank each and every one of you, especially my family and my friends who took the time to be with me this evening to receive the award. But I want you to know that I receive it along with the many, many, many people who go unrecognized and unencouraged day in and day out, who make Garner a great place to be. So thank you for this honor this evening.
The investment update. Craig Robinson. Welcome again, Craig.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Beverly.
Thank you.
Thank you, my good friend.
Thanks.
That's okay, Michael.
Well, it's an honor to come behind Amy. What a great honor for her and the great things she does for this community. And speaking of community, you guys are performing pretty well. Pam told me about the AAA rated investment piece, so congratulations there. That's a major accomplishment for the town, so I'm really excited to hear about that and wish you this is great work on you all's part. And then also the announcement of Amazon coming here. Phenomenal news, outstanding news, so congratulations on that as well. Just really pleased to hear about all the great things happening here at the town, and glad I could see it and be a part of it in some regard. So with that, I'll get into the presentation. Just a lot of good news to talk about in terms of the economy. As with most presentations that I do for the town, I start with the economic update, and then I talk about the town's portfolio. Then I get into kind of what we're watching next and any ideas that we may have in the future that the town should consider. So I'll try to be brief in my comments because I know it's been a long day for you all. So here's all the economic indicators that we watch for a portfolio such as yourselves that we manage, which is very short term. So most of the securities in the portfolio mature in 1 year and under, and these are the key economic indicators that we look at. So if you look at the top left chart, this is GDP, US GDP. So last quarter, the second quarter of 2018, GDP came in at 4.1%, which is pretty outstanding, and that's the highest level since the third quarter of 2014. So good news there with GDP, and a lot of that was driven by business investment, as you happening here at the town. and also consumer spending. This bottom chart talks about consumer confidence, which is at an all-time high since 2000. And consumers are very confident in what's happening in the economy, so they're spending money. And you've probably seen it at all the establishments here in the town. If you go to inflation, that's the important measure that the Fed looks at. Core PCE, which is that the solid blue line, the solid gray line, grayish line, is just below 2%. It's at 1.9, and that's the measure that the Fed looks at as they take into consideration whether or not they're going to raise rates. So they want to stay at that dotted orange line, which is 2% inflation. Make sure that the economy is not overheating and good things are happening. So with 4.1 GDP, right at 2% inflation, consumer confidence up at all-time high, and the other important measure is unemployment, which is at 3.9%. This slide is saying that the economy is really performing pretty well, and we should be happy with what we're seeing in the economy. The stock market is doing well, and the fixed income market is starting to perform better. I added a slide this time just to talk about the North Carolina economy. I think I'm going to continue to add this to the presentation because I'm sure you're curious, not only to know what's happening nationally, but also what's happening on the local level. So North Carolina GDP, this is on a yearly basis. The data is a little bit stale, not as current as we get from the national level, but North Carolina GDP has been strong for the last 10 years, essentially. North Carolina is ranked 15th in terms of GDP growth last year, so that's pretty good for the state to be ranked 15th out of 50 states. It's pretty strong. In the District of Columbia, that's pretty strong. So North Carolina has a lot to be proud about there. And also, North Carolina is the 8th fastest job growth market in the country for the year so far. So a lot of good things happening in North Carolina. Manufacturing is one of the main drivers for job growth in the state. From a personal income standpoint, for the year, North Carolina ranked 13th. So North Carolina has been performing pretty well. The economy is pretty strong here in North Carolina, and you guys have seen the results of that for the town. So the short-term credit environment, this is what we really want to pay attention to. This is the securities that we buy for the town's portfolio. So short-term treasuries, agencies, and commercial paper. We added commercial paper last year, if you all remember, adding a little credit exposure because the yields were attractive. You can get 6-month commercial paper at the higher yields than a 2-year treasury security. So you take some of that interest rate risk off the table because we're in a rising interest rate environment, but you also get higher yields with commercial paper at a short-term security. So let me backtrack and say that again. We're buying 6-month commercial paper when we could buy 2-year treasuries, but treasury yields are rising and there's more interest rate risk with longer maturing securities because you just have more fluctuations in the market as opposed to a 6-month security. There's not as much market value fluctuation in the yields. So we like credit securities. GS 159-30, that's General Statutes 159-30, does not allow you to buy any junk kind of credit, so everything is highly rated securities in terms of commercial paper, as well as, which is also in the investment policy, so we have highly rated securities in the portfolio in terms of commercial paper. But we're definitely looking at commercial paper opportunities to buy for the town portfolio to enhance the yield, enhance the return of the portfolio. Any questions there? I know I said a mouthful, but I want to just take a minute to see if there's any questions. The U.S. Treasury yield curve. If you look at the current yields, this is the quarter end essentially, and you look at that 2-year, so left column, 1, 2, 3, fourth down, 2-year. The 2-year is at 2.53%, and go all the way down, and the 10-year is at 2.86%. So you're probably hearing in the news that the yield curve is starting to flatten, and the measure that folks look at when they say the yield curve is flattening is the 2-year and the 10-year. So in 2014, the spread between the 2-year and 10-year, that's essentially the change in interest rates, the spread was 260 basis points, or 2.6%. Now it's at 33 basis points, or even today it's at 23 basis points. So it's definitely shortened. So that typically signals a recession coming as one of the measures that a recession is potentially coming. However, there are other indicators that we are looking at and we all need to look at to see if that's really going to happen. Well, I just talked about GDP. That's one measure that you have to look at to see if this if a recession is coming. GDP had a great print, came in at 4.1%. Forecasting for the rest of the year, we're looking at 3% GDP growth. So does that signal a recession? No, that doesn't signal a recession. You need to look at unemployment. Unemployment has been consistently low, 3.9% at the last reporting. Strong unemployment rate, strong job growth. Another indicator that you need to look at. I think that with this measure, things are a bit different when you look at this particular indicator of a recession, when you look at all the other indicators and growth in the economy and things that are happening in the economy. If things begin to overheat and inflation ticks up higher than that 2% measure, let's say inflation goes to 3%, the Fed may react to that. It may raise rates a lot faster than they currently are. We're expected to get potentially 2 more rate increases this year, one in September. We're at about 90% probability that that will happen. And probably in December, we may get another rate hike. It just depends on what happens between now and the end of the year. But right now, this curve indicates that there's a recession coming, but all the other indicators are saying that it's not. So we'll continue to look to see what's happening with the other indicators. If they change, then we can revisit this discussion here about the recession. So if you hear in the news about a recession coming because of the 2 and 10-year spread, take a pause, look at the other indicators, GDP, job growth, and you'll have a better indication of what's exactly happening. And don't worry, we'll try to be well ahead of that, and I'll definitely communicate to Pam, who will ultimately communicate to you, and I'll come back if you all have any questions between now and then. This next chart kind of just reiterates what I was saying about the Treasury yield starting to flatten. The Fed dictates a lot of short-term interest rates. It essentially dictates how we manage our portfolio. So we're constantly watching the Fed and their decision making. Like I said earlier, we're expecting a 90% probability that the Fed will raise rates in September. Potentially, we might get another one in 2018. This is the FOMC dot plot. This is something that the Fed actually releases after their meeting. They released this in June, the last meeting when they made a rate hike. The minutes come out tomorrow, so we're watching to see what the Fed has to say about minutes and future rate hike projections, or how they see about GDP growth and other indicators. So tomorrow will be an important day of reading those minutes and seeing what they have to say about the future of the economy, whether they're comfortable with how things are progressing, or if they're going to make any changes to the monetary policy. Another important measure that came out of this last Fed meeting is the new Fed chair, Chairman Powell, said that the Fed will move to a press conference after every Fed meeting starting in January of 2019. So typically every other meeting, they would have a press conference to let the press ask questions of the Fed president, and then they would talk about potentially raising rates at that press conference. Well, now they're moving to doing it after every meeting starting in January. Chairman Powell says that's for transparency purposes. The market's thinking that they want to be prepared to be ready to raise at any time after one of those meetings. So they're moving to this press conference to announce if they're going to raise rates at that time. So the Fed, this market is just trying to be prepared to what they're saying. If they feel like the economy is overheating, they could raise at a potential meeting, and they'll indicate that in the press conference. So it's another thing that we're watching going forward. We layered in a little bit of detail into this chart. If you look at the green line, that's the Fed funds futures. That's the market essentially and where they think interest rates are going. These little blue dots are all the Fed presidents that are on the FOMC, the committee. And they think that rates will probably be higher in 2018 and out to 2019, but the market still thinks that we'll be below 3% in terms of Fed interest rates. We'll see, but I think that the line you really want to look at is the market and what the market thinks. Just doing a survey of all the market participants and taking into factors of futures and what the market expects where rates should be. We think for the year we'll probably be no higher than 2.5%. So we'll get another 2 hikes essentially this year, September and then December. I'll take a pause and see if there's any questions about that.
This may not relate at all, but I know the current administration or the president has indicated that he'd like to consider changing from all the companies reporting their profits, dividends on a quarterly basis to a semi-annual basis every 6 months. Does that have any impact in any of this stuff you're talking about here in your opinion?
Yeah, so that's short-termism. That's the term that has been coined. And it's basically the companies are thinking about the next quarterly meeting instead of thinking long-term in terms of business decision-making. So, we got to make sure we have good earnings for the next quarter instead of doing it semi-annually. Then you don't have that short-termism. Folks are not preparing or making short-term decisions for their company that affects the stock price. I can tell you, I believe 92% of the companies in the S&P reported within the last, up until this point for the second quarter. And I think 79% of those 90 companies had positive earnings growth. So our companies are strong. We don't have an opinion on the short-termism just yet. I think the SEC is studying it. We'll see what the SEC has to say about it. Not PFM, Craig's opinion, Craig Robinson, my opinion. I kind of agree with the president there that maybe taking some of that short-termism effect out of the market and have companies think longer term may help companies with better decision making. But as I said, you still had positive earnings growth for a majority of the S&P companies. So we'll see. We'll see. But that's a very good question.
Yeah, thank you.
The other hot topic is tariffs and trade wars. So when we produced this chart, this is as of May, and there was a lot of back and forth between May and now in terms of between China and the U.S., where we said, okay, we'll hit you with tariffs on $50 billion of exports, and then China came back and said we'll do the same, and then went up to $200 billion on applying tariffs to imports. And China said whatever the U.S. does, we'll do the same thing. Things have cooled a little bit in the last week. I think something came out earlier in the week that, or Monday, or excuse me, last week that China and the U.S. will meet soon to talk about the trade war and trying to cool tempers and the impact that it's having on the various countries' economies. These are some of the industries within the U.S. that export products to China that are being impacted by tariffs. Vehicles is one I like to point out because I think we all can relate to vehicles. We all drive one, I would think. And so that's having some impact because of the materials, the inputs that go into making a car. So there is some impact there. But I think also folks aren't buying as many cars as they once were. The cars are lasting longer. So the auto industry is just a little bit different now. But tariffs are having some impacts on these industries. The ones in red are where the tariff is going to be applied. So soybeans, aircraft, vehicles, plastics, chemicals, and cereals are the ones that are going to be impacted potentially. The market, like what it heard between China and the U.S. talking and getting together and meeting and trying to cool tempers in terms of trade tariffs. So the market's been up for the last couple of days. I think the Dow was up over 100 points today. S&P is almost at a record high, hit an intraday record high. Apple was crossed over $1 trillion market capital. It's just, the market's kind of shrugging off. They're a little bit worried about this, but still shrugging it off because nothing is definitive just yet in terms of these tariffs. And the more that the U.S. and China gets together, meets and talks, maybe we can avoid having a really bad trade war. So we'll see. I'll have more detail once that meeting is set and scheduled and the results of that meeting.
While you're on this page, am I looking at this correctly, that in the center column, that 50% of our exports of seed, fruit, and soybeans is going to China, to one place? Or 53.7 of seed and fruits?
Correct.
And 62% of soybeans. So if particularly, I'm just thinking of North Carolina, and there's a lot of farmers that have a secondary cash crop being soybeans, with almost 2/3 of what they're selling going to China. And if China wants to create a problem, then that's almost like, it's almost a 1-for-1 direct hit on North Carolina. But I know that's not, Garner's not necessarily their issue, but just trying to, this is good information to have in the first place.
Sure.
But go to, so those percentages, what I was trying to interpret, makes sense then to you?
That's correct. I don't have the numbers in front of me in terms of the agricultural impact that agriculture has on GDP for North Carolina. I could come back and get that number to you, and we can probably drill down. I'm actually curious to know that too, and drill down to see just the impact that soybeans and the agriculture tariffs could potentially have on North Carolina and the economy. Right now, it seems like it's shrugging it off because the GDP growth and job growth in North Carolina is pretty strong, and manufacturing is a big part of that. I would need to go back and see what the agriculture numbers look like for North Carolina.
There's a real divide in North Carolina, urban versus rural. I mean, there's a
Sure.
big gap between us, and I didn't see tobacco products on there, but let me go to the right-hand side, trying to interpret that. It's U.S. exports, and we'll use the top two. Is that our export of seed and fruit and soybeans as a percentage of our gross domestic product,
Of the
it does 0.08, so essentially 1/10 of 1% of our gross domestic product is in either one of these. So it's a small part of the total,
right.
but when you isolate it with that focused on going to one outlet, brings it home.
It really does, and there's companies that are in that industry are being significantly impacted by these tariffs.
Now, I enjoy reading graphs. What does this overall thing mean to Garner?
It means stay tuned. It's just something that's been going on in the market that that we're all paying attention to, that we're a little bit concerned about. So I wanted to add it here, but also to show you, looking at that green, the far right column, that you can see the percentage of the overall GDP. I mean, we're still printing 4.1% GDP and expectations of 3%. These tariffs aren't really impacting those numbers that greatly if we're forecasting 3% GDP for the remainder of the year. So these industries are impacted. So it's just saying there's a lot of noise around it, but when you really drill down to the numbers, it's impactful, but not that impactful where it's going to affect the Fed's decision to raise interest rates or affect interest rates.
On the surface, we see current president conducting business in a much more open, in-your-face type of way as opposed to some of his predecessors. For those that are monitoring the market every day, how does it's pushed to us is that you got to pick a favorite, but to you and your colleagues, I'm sure, try to push away the smoke screen and get down to the basics. What's going on different today than what was going on a president ago, or 2 or 3 or 4 presidents ago?
The impact, the most significant impact, I think, on the markets has been the tax reform. So the tax reform that went into place at the end of last year has had a significant impact on the economy, where folks are getting a little bit more in their checks. So confidence is up there spending money. Corporations, tax rates are lower, so they're doing a lot more business investment or share buybacks, and that's propping up growth for companies. You know, the banks are a lot more stable, and they're lending a little bit more, or not a little bit more, but a lot more. Credit standards are starting to loosen up a little bit. So folks are feeling good about what's happening in the U.S. The U.S. is the strongest economy at this point in time, and the rest of the world recognize that, and they're doing investments in the United States, and that's helping our country grow. And that's why you see strong job growth and GDP growth. That's just one of the many factors, but the Tax Reform Act did have a positive impact on the economy. I'll have to, I think the last time I came here, we had a chart on showing the impact that it had on GDP so far. I think we'll refresh that, and the next time we talk, I'll make sure I bring that, make sure I make a note of that.
We appreciate you educating us on this and giving us some in language that we can understand.
I hope so. This last slide in this economic update section, I don't typically talk about equities because we manage a fixed income portfolio for the town, but I figured we like to talk about equities here sometimes. So I had an equity chart just to show you what's happening, you know, over the last 10 years in terms of equity markets. Far left is right after the financial crisis, and bonds and equity. So the blue bar is stocks, and the yellow bar is bonds. It was a significant drop off, and you know, we all understood that, and you saw a significant rebound in 2009. But if you go all the way towards the end of this chart, you can see 2016 on, we've had positive equity and fixed income returns, except for last quarter of 2018. First quarter 2018, stocks and the bond market was down, but we've definitely rebounded in the equities markets, as you probably have seen in your 401k and retirement packages, and bonds have kind of remained flat. Now we'll see that in the town's portfolio earnings for the year, for the last quarter and the first quarter. But just to kind of give you some perspective on what's happening in the markets, it's been pretty strong over the last few years in terms of equity returns. So what you really care about and want to know about is what's happening with the town's portfolio. So as of June 30th, we always report on a quarterly basis. So these numbers are as of June 30th, 2018. The market value of the portfolio is about $9.8 million. The yield at market on June 30th was 2.3%. The yield at cost, meaning when we bought the securities in the portfolio, was 1.92. But if you look at pricing the securities in the portfolio on June 30th, the yield was 2.33. The portfolio duration was 0.84, so if there's a duration of 1, that means basically the securities in the portfolio have an average maturity of 1 year. We're slightly less than 1 year because we're in a rising interest rate environment, and this 0.84 is less than the benchmark that we compare ourselves to because we were concerned about rising interest rates, so we wanted to be defensive, so we were short the benchmark to protect the portfolio. When things start to stabilize a little bit more, we're not in such a rising interest rate environment, you'll see the duration be higher than this 0.84, make it closer to 1. But just to protect from interest rate risk, we shorten duration in the portfolio. So basically, shorter term securities mature quicker, then we can reinvest that money in higher yielding securities at that point in time. So this is a total return performance of the town's portfolio, and this is going back to quarter ended September 2017. So the Bank of America Merrill Lynch 1-year Treasury Index is the benchmark that we compare ourselves to in terms of performance for the town's portfolio. These are book value dollars, not actual dollars on total return is essentially market value gains in the securities in the portfolio plus interest earnings on the securities in the portfolio. So if you look at the far right column in the green, the difference from a percentage-wise and the difference from a monetary perspective, comparing the performance of the town's portfolio to the benchmark, we've pretty much outperformed 3 out of 4 quarters. We underperformed in the first quarter because we were being very defensive in terms of rising interest rates and some uncertainties in the market. But we've outperformed by 5 basis points in June, and a lot of that had to do with some of the trades that we did where we swapped out some agency securities for some better yielding commercial paper securities and also longer dated treasury securities as well. So good news there. If you look at trailing 12-month period, we outperformed the benchmark by about 11 basis points, and the difference in about a dollar value, about $11,000. So pretty decent performance there. Thing that you want to measure us against if we're doing our job effectively is, are we beating the benchmark? Is PFM beating the benchmark? And if we are, then we're doing our job. If we're not, then you should call me to task. And Pam definitely will call me to task if that's the case. So I'll pause. Any questions there?
Will you have a projection for what, I'm trying to remember what was in our budget that we're expecting for generation of funds for this coming year. Do you have a projection on what our total investment would yield for the coming year?
No, but I can get that for you.
What was in our budget, Pam? Do you recall? General terms?
I think we had roughly 400,000, but that is a combination of both PFM and the Capital Management Trust.
Okay. I thought it was 400 and some, but when I was looking at this, I said, this is not all of it then.
No, this is just a small, a portion of the overall funds for the town. Next slide is just showing you that we're in compliance with GS 159-30 and also the town's investment policy. Just showing you the sector limits and the issuer limits. Last year we added commercial paper to the portfolio, which I think was a good decision for the town and is enhanced performance. We did make a few changes, I believe last quarter or the fourth quarter, to the policy where we took down sector limitations for municipals, commercial paper, and bankers' acceptances. It was at 25%. We took it down to 15, just based on the nature of those securities, and you don't want to have that large of an allocation to those types of credit products. So we took the sector limitation down to 15, and we're comfortable with that number there. And just lastly, what we're watching, this kind of goes back to those key indicators that I talked about in the beginning. We're watching money market yield curves of treasuries and agencies and CP, how they're going to perform in the future. This top chart is just a repeat of what you saw earlier, but just wanted to let you know, like, if you needed to think about what PFM is doing and what we're thinking about and watching, these are all the things that we're watching for the future. The flattening of the yield curve is still something that we're going to watch. The probability of Fed hikes because short-term interest rates impact the portfolio. And then also, GDP, global growth, unemployment, job growth, corporate profits, inflation, and consumer confidence. The survey of economists for the third quarter anticipate GDP to come in at 3%. The Fed measure, core PCE, or also inflation, at 2%. Unemployment will be at 3.8%. Fed funds will be at 2.25. Forecasters believe that the 10-year will be above 3% and the 2-year will be at 2.7%. Still flattening, but not inverting, which I talked about earlier. So still strong growth for the economy in the third quarter, based on economic forecasts by economists that participate in the market. And we'll continue to watch all these things that's on this slide and report back to you all and try to outperform the market.
As always, thank you for coming. You always educate us and we tend to forget, and then you do it again, and then we appreciate it.
Absolutely. Any additional questions?
How's the family?
Doing great. Girls are good. The youngest is probably going to be walking by the next time I see you. So our house is pretty active, but girls are doing great. Wife's doing great. Things are good. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Thank you all. Have a great day. And congratulations again on the AAA rating from S&P and
Thank you.
and Amazon. That's outstanding.
Thank
Can't
you,
wait to see the portfolio grow more because of those things.
Thank you, Fred.
All right, next up.
Order something from Amazon, maybe look for the shipping place, see if it came out of Garner.
All right, I will. It was exciting to see.
Next on the agenda is the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made and second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. No public hearings. Sonia Shaw.
Good evening, council.
Good evening.
The last time I was before you, we were getting ready to send out our RFPs for both the comprehensive plan as well as Meadowbrook. And we have done that, and here to present you with a couple of proposals tonight regarding both the comprehensive plan as well as our Meadowbrook plan. And I'm gonna pick right up where Craig left off. It's a great day in Garner. We'll be planning the next 10 years for Parks and Recreation with Amazon's announcement, new recreation center, up for accreditation in a couple years. So things are moving quickly for us. But before I get started with the comprehensive plan proposal, wanted to share with you just where we were in our process. As I stated, we issued those RFPs in April, and we received 5 responses for the comprehensive plan and then 11 for Meadowbrook. So we got a good return on information for the processes. We closed out the RFPs in May and conducted interviews in June, made our selections July, and here before you with the firm we selected was McAdams. And with us tonight is Iona Thomas. She'll just wave her hand. She's the Director of Public Sector for McAdams, and we are certainly looking forward to working with them. So Iona, I guess when we do Greenway stuff, you can share a few words if you care. If you choose to, I then. Absolutely. So I'll begin tonight with the comprehensive plan proposal, and this is our 10-year plan for Parks and Recreation and the provision of these services in Garner. I'm certainly excited about that. The timeline for completion on these, roughly 9 months to a year, really depends on how quickly we move through the planning processes. And what I'll do tonight is just highlight some of the major areas in the proposal. I won't go through every single one, but we'll certainly highlight the major ones for you. So we'll start with the comprehensive plan. On the first page, you'll see our kickoff meetings that we'll have, and this will certainly be to review our project goals and to begin establishing tasks for the process. You'll also see on page 2 mention about community demographics and recreation trends. And this, of course, will be used for us to better understand our growing community, which is very evident, and as well as understanding what the local market trends look like for Parks and Recreation. After we complete that process, we'll begin conducting, McAdams will begin conducting their inventory of our Parks and Recreation facilities, as well as providing analysis and mapping of that process. And that will certainly be used for us as we move towards making recommendations for our future facility and park improvements. And throughout the process, on page 4, you'll see a listing of a number of meetings that we'll have that will engage our public and community. In this meeting will certainly be staff, of course, council, our general public. We'll get input from our advisory boards as well as our athletic partners, because this is truly the building blocks for the comprehensive plan, and will provide us with data that we'll certainly use throughout the process. We will take opportunities in this process to combine as many meetings as we can, since we will be working with the same group of stakeholders for most of these, particularly as it relates to our athletic partners. So we'll try to combine some of those meetings and hopefully recognize some cost savings there. Another major component of the comp planning process is the citizen survey. This will be distributed randomly to 300 citizens in Garner. And the purpose of the survey is mostly to provide feedback from the general public and our stakeholders on our parks, facilities, greenways, as well as our programming. And again, this information will also be used to drive the long-term vision for our future services. On page 7, you'll see vision and mission development sessions that will be held with staff, along with assessment of our department programs. And this will be an opportunity for there to be review of the department and see how we're aligning ourselves with our community needs. On pages 8 through 10, there'll be several, 5 major components for the comprehensive plan that will take place. We'll begin, of course, with review again of our current practices and operations. We'll also have assessment and review of our maintenance and operations for our parks. Since Public Works maintains our parks, we want to be sure that we assess how those operations are going. Again, as this moves us forward to thinking long-term in terms of planning for operations, staffing, and future facilities. There'll also be an analysis of our budget and our financial operations as it relates to our department's pricing structure, how we set our user fees, as well as how we generate revenues. Another assessment will be for our arts programming. We're really excited about this because we've actually not done a lot of our arts program assessment since Debbie was hired. So that's probably been 7, 8+ years. So certainly time to revisit that. You all are well aware that our programming has grown in our arts, but there's always room for more. So we want to spend some time doing an assessment with our arts programming and looking at what our participation satisfaction levels are with our participants and checking on the populations that we serve throughout Garner and hopefully looking for future funding opportunities to support the arts. The next assessment, the health and wellness assessment, this is actually a part of our commitment to the Rex Foundation grant, who funded us $120,000 in our new recreation center grant. And this assessment will provide us with a review of our policies, our programs, facilities, and opportunities for our citizens to engage in healthy lifestyles. So of course in this assessment, we're looking for the goal of establishing evidence of opportunities that we provide our citizens with opportunities to engage in healthy lifestyle options through our parks and recreation services. So once all of this data has been compiled, we'll be presented with a draft of the comprehensive plan. And in that plan, there'll certainly be recommendations for our parks, our programs, our facilities, our greenways, and maintenance as well as staffing, since we will be reviewing that as well. And then there will be an action plan that will be developed, which will prioritize our future recreational needs. And the proposed fee for this portion of our comprehensive plan is $80,060. So that's the programming part of the comprehensive plan. The next part is the greenway portion of that. And what I'll do is ask Iona to come up and just share with us some highlights on the greenway master plan development process that we are proposing for your review. And then I'll be back.
Thank you, Sonia. Well, it's very nice to be here, and we're working with your staff on the South Garner Greenway connector, so I'll be back next Tuesday to talk to you guys again, but it's been nice to get a glimpse of what your town is like, and it seems very special. So in our the Greenway analysis piece of the project, we've spent some time reviewing your planning efforts to date, and greenways and trails are an important part of all of the plans that you have done to date. And in your Garner Forward plan, there are several specific greenway and trail kind of action items that come out of that. So we want to take a look and update the Greenway Master Plan that you have on the books, and we'll be looking for the gaps that need to be connected in your greenway network, We'll be looking for opportunities for partnerships with NCDOT, with Clean Water Management Trust Fund, with other funding resources, with Wake County Open Space. And ultimately, what we want you to end up with on the Greenway side is a very actionable plan that your staff can then take and move forward and apply for funding, get projects designed, get projects constructed, because we know there's very, very high demand in Garner for these facilities. So.
At this point, I will take questions, if you have those, for the comprehensive and/or Greenways plan.
Sonia, mine may not be so much a question as a comment. I'm impressed with the, certainly with the comprehensive nature of this and the things that it covers, so it's probably not fair to pick out a couple of things, but in particular, the portion of the plan that talks about maintenance, I think is important. I think we're, and this is just from a layperson standpoint, I think we're doing a pretty good job, but it seems to me that we're starting to show some wear and tear in some of our major parks, and I'm thinking about mainly Lake Benson Park and also White Deer Park. I'm on those trails on a pretty regular basis.
That's
and,
right.
You can, hopefully we're doing the right things, but it looks like there's certainly going to need to be some repairs and revamping and stuff there. So I was very much pleased to see that in the plan, and I'm sure we'll get good advice about some things we might need to do there. The other thing I would mention is it excites me to see, and I'm sure this is part of our previous plan, that we're giving some attention to our greenways. It's an area I have a strong interest in, and again, we've got a good start in that area, but there's still a lot to do, I think. So hopefully this consultant will help us move the ball forward in that regard. So
Very good.
just a couple of comments on that. Thank you.
Yeah, this was a robust plan compared to our previous one, which focused on a lot of the programming and staffing needs, and this really is more future focused intentionally because we are growing, and as you mentioned, you know, we have new facilities coming, but we also have older facilities that we need to maintain as well. So making sure we include all of that in our comprehensive plan review will certainly help us as we prepare for the future.
I'm not sure my question is for you, Sonia, or for Matt. I've asked a couple of times about the Greenway, the connectivity over at Lake Moore from that community down to White Deer Park and Lake Benson Park. Matt, is this involved in this plan, or is that a separate issue that we talked about?
That's a separate issue, and actually this time next week we will be talking about some options and schedule and costs and that kind of thing. So
She'll be back next week.
Okay, all right.
yeah,
good.
so they,
all right.
I mean, they will of course factor that in when they're thinking about future Greenway plans, but they're technically separate things.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Question? Looking at master plans over the years generally revolve around infrastructure and concepts, and with the emphasis on plan and looking to the future. I was interested to see and to hear when you were going through it tonight that it's getting into internal assessments on programming, operations and maintenance, and financial and budget analysis. Is that somewhat of a new trend in master planning where the consultant comes in and looks internally as well as externally?
Absolutely, because what we want to walk away with a holistic picture of what Parks and Recreation looks like and what the provision of those services will look like over the next 10 years. So for us, it goes beyond just our internal review, but it also helps us give you numbers in terms of what we'll need down the road. So it is more comprehensive, but certainly gives us a better picture of what we'll need to maintain services in the next 5 to 10 years.
Sonia, I can add to that from around the country. So what we are seeing is that communities are looking at their park amenities more in terms of having a business plan, the same way that we would have a business plan for any for-profit operation. So we're looking at all of the elements that will make your facilities sustainable. And so we're looking at the financial side of things definitely more intensively than we did even a decade ago. And we have a lot of tools that we can do that. One thing I did want to clarify is on the statistically valid survey, our goal is 300 returned surveys. There'll be a much broader casting of the net. Several thousand folks will be included, and our goal is to get 300 back, which will give us enough information to make it a statistically valid survey. With regard to maintenance, what we see when we work with communities around the state is that it is easier to come by capital money than it is to come by maintenance money. And so we want to make sure that we're not putting anything into your system that isn't going to be able to be maintained at the level that matches your vision for the community. So we bring a real strong awareness to the maintenance side of it, and we want to understand what your maintenance capacity is and your commitment to maintenance so that we're matching that.
Before you hear Ms. Cotter,
No, it's fine.
let me continue just a minute. When I was just adding up that portions about internal operations, so that's maybe 15 or 16,000 out of the total or something in that range, just making a quick look. And so that's maybe 12% of the total is internal operations. And I don't really have a good feel for whether that's high, low, or in between. But at least that's a significant amount of dollars to dedicate to this internal operations. That's somewhat new for us, and that'll be that's going to be I think that's going to be a positive thing, not just for Parks and Recreation, but see how it might play out in future years with other departments. One of the things that was mentioned that you just mentioned was about community input. I think you probably know you want as much community input as you can, then you've got a lot more confidence in what the output's going to be, and we likewise have a lot more confidence. I'm not trying to add more work to Rick, but we've got a communications director that if y'all work in sync, I think you'll get an optimum result. And although I know you all, McAdams works with a lot of different municipalities. You'll find that our communications group will be very cooperative and will be a real asset to this overall operation. Your company certainly comes with a good reputation, and I'm not surprised that, and actually I'm glad that you got both major projects linked together. I'll talk about that overlapping of service in a little bit later when we talk about money.
Tanya's already whittled us down, so.
Well, I'll go ahead and pitch it right now. I see the overlapping only amounts to a $2,250 savings, and I already see it written up in there where you're going to have, and you're going to be talking about one or the other projects at the same time. You're going to be talking about Project D at the same time you're here talking about Project A. So I'm not going to hang you up, but I will encourage Sonia to see if there aren't greater opportunities of overlap. But
well, I will say that that Sonia has negotiated for you. She's a very good negotiator, and so this version reflects her good work. But I will also say that McAdams is not a supplement-driven firm. I lead our public sector group, so all of our public sector pursuits and project deliveries. We are not a supplement-driven firm. We strive to give you a fair fee estimate because we know, because philosophically, we are not going to come to Sonia every time we have, an additional meeting or there's a slight scope change and say that we need more money. So the only way Sonia's going to hear that from us is if there is a significant change in scope or the length of the project. So unless there is a major deviation from the scope that we see here, we're never going to talk about money again. And we pride ourselves on that. We are passionate about the work, sometimes to the detriment of our bottom line. But I take the heat from that with the leadership of the company so that our planners and designers get to do the work that they.
Well, when you say supplement-driven, is that another way of saying that you're not really dependent upon additional services?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I'm not disparaging other folks in the firm, but some firms have a model where they come in with a very low price, an aggressively low price, knowing that if they get past 1 or 2 meetings, then they're going to be asking you for additional. Our goal is to provide you with a fair representation of what we think the work is, and then we live with it unless there's a major change in scope.
Very good.
It's quite refreshing. Quite refreshing.
I totally agree with that strategy. That just in my experience, that's the quickest way to lose a client for the next job, and we're judged by you're no better than the current job or than your last job, and if money is always the issue, nobody wants to talk about that. They want to talk about performance and what the end product's going to look like. Let me mention a couple of things on terms and conditions that I think you probably. That we'll probably we'll probably make as a condition of the contract. One is we don't entertain any clause about a limitation of liability. Mm-hmm. And the second one, we prefer mediation over arbitration. And if that's 16 and 18, section 16 and 18 on your terms and conditions. I don't think that will make or break this project, but that's our standard procedure. Am I off base, Bill?
And if you can just provide us with the language, I'll give that to our counsel, and we'll get that sorted out.
I think essentially eliminating a limitation of liability. Do you have a provision where you're carrying professional liability? Is that in there?
We do have professional liability insurance, and we can provide a certificate of insurance, a COI, to the town, naming the town as.
And I recognize this is not a construction project, and the limitation of liability is probably a moot point on this type of contract. But that's our policy and on professional services agreements. So now I was glad to see this. I really appreciate the way the scope is written. You're long on scope and short on how you want to get paid. And I've had to chastise my own people. Is you'd be 5 times, 6 times, 10 times as long on scope as you are on how you're going to get paid. Nobody wants to read about that stuff. Just give them the bottom line.
We don't.
So
you
know how to put together a good proposal.
I know we're in business and we love our business, but that's the least favorite part of my job.
Really, it was enjoyable reading the proposal. Well done.
Any more questions on the comprehensive plan?
Couple items. One of them, the financial budget analysis, I'm glad to see. We're going to look more of it as a business plan, look at opportunities to increase current and new sources of revenue. As I have been talking about, just one aspect of doing that with the way we look at building fields in the future, multi-purpose fields and how they need to be constructed, turf fields, and the demand for them in this area. They're not building a new parking net there or a new one in Morrisville just to build it to sit there and have the taxpayer support it. It's built with a business plan. And so I'm glad to see that with opportunities at Meadowbrook, maybe other parks, for future parks. We have, I know, talking with Sonia many times, the demand, or people are asking about multi-purpose fields, flat fields to use for a number of sports and athletic uses. We can sit here and list 6 or 8 right now, so I'm glad to see that. Secondly, I hope in this plan, we will look at the underused Creech Road Park that we approved 15 years ago or 14 years ago as a park for 3 fields. We've only built 1. We have a multi-purpose field there that's grass that is not used, in my opinion, the way it should be used in partnership with the school. So whatever goes there, whether it's what was planned to be baseball or softball fields or other types of fields, I hope that we get something out of a park that already has a parking lot and already has restrooms and just sitting there with wooded trees on it, woods and trees on it, that I think is very underutilized. Gray's opinion, but I've been here long enough to know that we approved the CUP years ago and we hadn't built it. So I hope that that will be a part of what's done with this long-range plan, is looking at what to do with that park and how to better use it, because again, got a huge, big old flat field back there, multi-purpose field that is underutilized, and we have other fields that could be built there. What other type of fields they may be, I don't know, but it's a park that is property that we have in partnership that we have not, in my opinion, developed, that will develop the way maybe we could have. So I hope that is considered in this process, is that particular park. It's nice to see the greenways on here, and I appreciate us looking at that, because as everyone knows how much I love the sidewalks and with the greenways, but I just remember that all this stuff costs money. And we hadn't got the first greenway done. We've been working this greenway 5 years, and we're here some next week, so maybe we're here a giant step forward, but we've been running place on that greenway for 3.5 or 4 years. And going backwards on it maybe. So hopefully we'll hear something next week that will encourage us to whether we're going to build a greenway or a half greenway, half sidewalk, or whatever we're going to consider doing. At least next week will be a start. And again, as we know, the cost of that greenway, wherever it can go, is higher than we thought it was going to be 5 years ago in the bond referendum. So like everything else, that cost is increased. Whether it's significant or not, we'll find out next week. I got a feeling it is. But anyway, I think we're determined to get that one built. And we have also heard, I think in the last few weeks, Wake County Commissioners supported connecting the greenway from that area toward Lake Wheeler, part of the county greenway system, to Lake Wheeler within the Raleigh system and the county system. So there's an opportunity in the future that we could have a significant greenway system on that part of town. And based on what it's, as I understand it, you can get on it there at White Deer Park and go all the way to Lake Wheeler. So that's good to see that that's being planned for, and they have their support from the county. So thank you for being here. I reckon we'll see you again next week with hopefully some good news on how to proceed with the South Garner Greenway.
Sonia, did you say that the expected completion date was 9 months?
9 months to a year is roughly what we talked about.
12 months. You don't want to go any further than that.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
If there's nobody else, could I just interject one quick point about budget, how we're going to pay for the work that we're talking about, both for this one and the Meadowbrook one, just so that you guys are clear about that as we go through the process. There was money in previous year's budgets, but totaling about $43,000 that's available for this, but we did not know at the time that we approved the budget. We didn't know how much to budget for this work, and so there will need to be another budget adjustment made, but I don't think it's something that we need to do right now, because we're going to try to incorporate it as part of this third quarter review that we mentioned during the budget adoption. The idea being that if we give ourselves 6 months or so into the year, we'll get a better sense for how our expenditures are looking, how our revenues are looking. We may be able to absorb some of these costs within the existing budget, and don't necessarily want to come and ask you immediately for fund balance or something else to pay for it, because we might not need all of that money. We may be able to find other ways of doing that. So at some point, we will need to true up the budget to be able to pay for the rest, but we have a process in place for how we're going to do that. But I didn't want you all to be surprised if you saw later that there was an adjustment potential coming.
But statutorily, when you authorize a contract, don't we likewise have to adopt a budget if it hadn't already been done? Maybe I'm off base on that, but don't we have to have the dollars in place for it?
And I hesitate to, I wanted you all to have enough information, but I hope I didn't make it confusing. The budget is there for us to meet our obligations. So being able to approve the contract statutorily, there's no issue.
Okay.
The question is just making sure that we have the funds lined up in the right place. And that's something that we can monitor and adjust as we need to. But the funds are there. There's no statutory or contractual concern about entering into this agreement. I was just bringing it up because in the future, in say January or February, you may see a true-up that references this project and the Meadowbrook project, and I didn't want you all to feel that you were surprised when we had this discussion tonight that didn't come up. So it shouldn't change it doesn't change procedurally anything that happens. And I hope I didn't confuse the matter, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that there's, at some point in the future when we do that true-up, you may see an adjustment to the budget to line the funds up appropriately for this.
Ready for a motion, Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead.
Move that we authorize the town manager to execute a contract for the comprehensive and Greenway Plan Development Services with McAdams, subject to the attorney's review of items 16 and 18 to their satisfaction regarding limitations of liability, arbitration, mediation, and professional liability insurance. Slow down on those three.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Sonia.
All right, so on to Meadowbrook, exciting Meadowbrook Park development. So Meadowbrook's process will be somewhat similar to the comprehensive plan. Again, we'll have kickoff meetings. There'll be a site analysis conducted. We'll also, for this specific park, of course, we'll look at some of the site suitability assessments that will have to occur so that we can evaluate what areas on the site are most suitable for whatever future amenities that we determine that we'll need in the future. So those are your first couple of pages. On page 3, you see a listing of several site-specific assessments. I won't go through all of those for you tonight, but did want to draw those to your attention. Wetland and streams, endangered species, cultural resources, stormwater management, as well as utility reviews. McAdams will conduct all of those assessments for us. Again, you'll see a number of public engagement opportunities listed on page 4 for our citizens. Again, a series of meetings, again, staff, council, the general public, our advisory boards, and athletic partners. In this one, we felt it was important to add our adjacent neighbors to Meadowbrook Park. We've not had conversations with them about future development, so certainly a great opportunity to engage them in this process, as well as stakeholders and friends of Parks of Meadowbrook. We want to engage them with all the history associated with this site. We want to make sure that we capture that and don't lose it as we continue working on developing this park. So again, we'll try and combine some of those meetings, of course, to recognize some cost savings, as well as capture feedback from both parties that will be involved in that process. As for the survey data on page 5 now, this information certainly will be pulled from the comprehensive plan. If you all recall, our original proposal, we wanted to make sure we were far enough along on the comprehensive plan before we started the Meadowbrook planning process. So part of the meetings we'll certainly have where we can capture that information, but until we get to a point where we have enough data collected from the comprehensive plan to be, again, thinking through what amenities will go into Meadowbrook, we'll have to align those in terms of our scheduling. So on page 5, you'll see fees have been included for architectural services. that will be needed to develop any of the facility spaces and or structures for this site. And then after collecting and analyzing and synthesizing all of this data, be it the public input, various assessments, a number of the data, we will move into a preliminary design ideas, which is the fun part. You know, we get to do some design charrette, so I'm certainly looking forward to that part of the process. And once we move from that, Adams will pull all of that data together and present us with 2 concept plans that we'll review and discuss, and probably review and discuss again, and narrow that down to 1 plan design that will be chosen, and this will be used to prepare the final master plan document for Meadowbrook. And you'll see on pages 6 and 7 what pieces of that master plan document will look like. Really excited that there'll be a 3D animation for marketing as we think down the road the next 3, 4, 5 years in terms of future partners for this site. Will certainly be a exciting opportunity to be able to show that to potential partners. The final document, of course, will also have cost estimates. And again, that operational analysis part, it's always important because we oftentimes get hooked on the construction side of it. But for us as staff, we are more concerned about the operational side of it and making sure we have the resources to maintain and conduct business as we have with our current facilities. So we'll have cost estimates, not only on construction, but we'll have the operational analysis piece, as we mentioned. That, of course, will look at what it will take for us to operate the park as we move to the next 3, 5, 10 years. I think that's really, really important for us to capture that information. I'm excited about that part of this planning process. There'll also be funding options that will be examined to determine are there other feasible methods of implementing this park development over the next few years. So that will certainly, again, assist us with the long-term planning for Meadowbrook. So fees proposed for this portion of the plan is $74,905. And again, certainly a detailed proposal for Meadowbrook. Certainly gives us opportunities to have our public engagement along with coming up with 2 concept plans, finalizing that to 1 plan, and then being able to look at not only the construction costs of it, but the operational costs for us to maintain that park for years to come. So I'll entertain questions on Meadowbrook at this point.
Question. Looking at conceptual design alternatives, I see that they'll develop 2 preliminary design concepts for review by the town staff, which that was one of the things I was looking for, to see if we could see 2 professionally looking alternative ways, and to give us some, which will help us engage a little bit more. That was by town staff. I saw either in this one or the comp plan where there was 2 meetings with the council. Was that restricted to the comp plan, or is that included in? For both?
We will come back and have that with you all as well.
Okay.
Yes.
So we'll get a chance to see those alternates.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. And be able to provide feedback. I mean, we certainly want to have your feedback in that, as well as your input when we get ready to see what evolves out of the process.
And what I was just hearing, that this will occur more towards the end of the comp plan in Greenway Park.
So the options.
When should we look for some, when should we look at, what's the time frame we're looking, where we're going to look at these 2 different concepts?
Right.
9 months, 6 months?
We're not, I'll let.
Be nice if it was six
talk
weeks.
more
but
so
anyway.
through the specifics of the schedule.
So, as Sonia said, we really want to make sure that we have all the input from the comp plan, so that we understand what the needs are for the community for Meadowbrook. So we need to get through probably the first 5 to 6 months through our public involvement, through our stakeholder, through the statistically valid survey, so that we can see really what needs to go into that park as it fits into your overall Parks and Rec network. So we're looking for what's in demand and what is deficient in your system. And then we'll look at Meadowbrook in that context. Once we have those pieces, then we go through all of that due diligence work that Sonia went through to make sure that we understand the limitations of the site and how we can have the lightest kind of environmental footprint on the site. And then we'll go into design. So it really is going to be later towards the very end of the comp plan that you'll be seeing concepts on Meadowbrook. I want to clarify too that you're not going to, it's not a binary choice between option A and option B. That never happens. There's always, like, you want, can I have some of this in option A and some of this in option B? And then we'll be happy to share with you, we've got some good examples of the visualizations that we do on our park projects. I think we take it for granted sometimes that we can look at a plan view or rendering and fill that in with our imaginations of what it's going to be like. But there are a lot of very, very smart people in different professions than me that can't do that exercise of taking something 2D and turning it into 3D. So the visualizations that we do really help people see what it's going to be like, and then it also helps them provide meaningful comments and input into the process. So I'll send you those links if you want to share them, because it's a tool. That tool has become much more affordable, and then McAdams has invested in some staff that are really passionate and are really good at it. So we're happy to be able to offer that to our municipal clients. It used to be just way too expensive to be able to do it, but it's much more.
I was glad to see the business side of this and your pro forma, and then but also potential for grants. Have you been out on this Meadowbrook site?
I haven't been to Meadowbrook. Rachel Cotter, who is the project manager on the comp plan in Meadowbrook site, has been there. And Rachel is a landscape architect who leads our Parks and Rec work for McAdams, and is a very creative, savvy park designer and park. So she's been out there.
I was going to ask you to tease us with what you could see out there and what potential
Rachel
of that site.
I can tease you about what I'm going to talk about next Tuesday.
There'll be I suspect for next Tuesday, there's going to be some folks from the community here. They'll be very interested in it, so, you know, but they are anxious to hear what's going on.
I will say staff has done a great job giving us the history of work that's been done.
Do I understand that, well, is it an optional service? It has to do with, I was looking in particular at the PARTIF grant. Are we, is that going to be a part of the funding we anticipate PARTIF grant or not?
We are looking to apply for Part F. For the Recreation Center, we did that in-house, so we left that as an option instead of including it in this process. Now, in 2 years, I may come back and say, well, we got a Recreation Center, we've got accreditation, we've got the park being developed, and who knows what else by then. But right now, I think we're going to leave it on the optional side for now.
Okay.
It's an additional service, and they put it in there as a cost of $10,000.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Do we need a motion to approve this particular?
Yeah, go ahead.
Right page, but I will move that we approve the proposal that McAdams, the services be engaged to perform as presented in this proposal this evening.
Let me add the same subject to that I had before, on section 16 and 18 of the terms and conditions related to limitation of liability, arbitration, mediation, and professional liability insurance.
Okay, you have a motion with that noted?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Glad to have you on board.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
And we point out that one reason we're available, we have the opportunity to have this park, is that Mr. Sam Bridges, who's out there, who's our town lobbyist, helped to lobby us. Brought this property to us at one time, and we actually, the first time, took a pass after doing some considerations, but he stayed on us and called me one day and said, I think we should reconsider this, and asked me some questions, and I told him we need to contact Mr. Dixon and see if we can put it back on the agenda. We'll review it, and we did, and here we are. So thanks to him, and also the folks at St. Augustine who were willing to work with the town.
Backing up a little bit, Gray's interest in that Creech Road property should be addressed. If it gets moved to the top of the list, let's say about time we've done it.
Time to evaluate what we need to put there and do something with it and use it more than it's underused.
That's right.
And we'll definitely take that in consideration as the process moves along.
Okay.
Finished? Can I move that we go into closed session or no? Oh, excuse me, we got reports, I'm sorry.
Ready for manager reports?
Yeah, let's do committee. No committee reports. Manager reports.
All right, before you have the Garner info report and also a financial report showing that we're about 8.34% through the budget year. However, a majority of the revenues are not collected until future months, mainly being property tax, and then sales tax will not start until October. So just wanted to point that out. No need to be alarmed. The revenues, that's just typical timing on governmental revenues. Then I have a number of things I'm going to have John update you on. It's a few things you've asked about over the last few meetings, and maybe one is a while back, but we've received some information from DOT on that, and we just wanted to get these before you asked about them again. We wanted to be proactive and give you some information on where these three issues stand. So the first one is the Garner Road drainage issue that came about a few weeks ago. Well, we've been talking about it for a number of years, but we really went out and investigated it and kind of saw what maybe some of the real causes were.
Can I interrupt just 1 second? Sonia, Rod, job well done on choosing McAdams. They're a firm with a good reputation. It's a good choice. I'm glad you got one firm doing both projects. That just I think that will be more than just the additive part. It'll be more than just the sum of the individual parts. So I know it's a process, and I'd love to ask plenty of questions about it, but I think the outcome is that I think Garner's going to have a good product working with this company.
Very good.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Go ahead, John.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
Did I thought Mr. Marshburn raised his hand. Maybe
No,
he was waving by. Okay, all right. So I'll just list the items. So John, give you an update on Garner Road drainage, the Garner Magnet High School issues with the grass and what the plan is for that, and then Creech Road. There was some discussion a little while back about the way the intersection was lined and striped. So, John.
The first one is, Mr. Dixon mentioned, was the drainage at Garner Road. Engineering and Public Works took looks at this. We contacted the railroad company and DOT. Forrest Jones has gone out and ended up being able to coordinate through using some contacts he has, coordinated an opportunity for railroad and DOT to be on site at the same time, which really never happens. So kudos to Mr. Jones for pulling in his contacts. DOT has committed to help extend the ditch on Garner Road towards the east so that there's more storage in the ditch. And it's a pretty unique configuration there, but if you go by and look at it, you'll see that the extension of the ditch eastward will help with some of the storage. They're also going to help upsize the pipe that goes under Garner Road. And I think that right now, there was originally some thoughts of using a different pipe under Garner Road. I think it sounds like now, and talking to Mr. Rollins, we may be working with the original pipe that was there, but there's some issues with a couple of property owners that we're trying to still work out. The DOT is still committed to upsizing the pipe and extending the ditch so that we can get some immediate relief.
Sean, tell us where that pipe is when you're on top of the road and what area is it? How close is it to Bryan Petroleum, or is it further back to Vanderbilt Springs Road?
So if you're familiar with the culvert that goes under the railroad, it's sort of visible from the road.
Right.
Very close to that, there's a pipe that runs diagonal from about that area, diagonally northwest under the road. And it goes under, there's two white houses, I think they're both white, there's two houses near one another. The pipe goes under that and actually goes under private property and comes out in a pond back in the back. And I think part of the challenge is whether or not they can make use of that one with it having some private property implications versus another spot in the road. And Matt may know some more details.
Well, the reason I ask is that I had a call from a Mr. Robert Moda in that area complaining about some drainage issues and mentioned the pond. So it sounds like it might be all tied together. Might be something that would give him some relief as well if that pipe is
Okay.
changed or fixed or whatever.
Yeah, I think so. Just one other thing to add. I talked to Forrest recently, and he had just had a conversation with DOT, and I think exactly how they might extend the ditch, some of those details are being worked out because of conversations between the two property owners, so that the upsizing of the pipe, all those things would still happen. They will have a solution. It's just that the solution may or may not involve the exact ditch plan that it would have. They're still working out the details of that. But I would hope that it would also address the other concerns you've raised.
Do we have a time frame on when to expect it to be done?
I think they were trying to give the property owners some amount of time to discuss between themselves what their preferred options would be, and they were giving them, I believe, until the end of the week to come to some conclusion, which would then give DOT a clear understanding of which path they needed to take. But I don't have a date in terms of the ultimate completed construction.
Sooner rather than later, correct?
Yes.
And one more question. Why have they not responded? This has been a problem for years. Why have we not had a solution before now?
This is the first time that I've been directly involved in it, so I really can't answer I really don't know any of the history behind it. I'm sorry. I think we're fortunate that, again, a relationship that Mr. Jones has with two individuals, one at DOT and one at the railroad, have come together to help it get solved. I don't know whether we didn't have those in the past, but this time his relationship with the two of them has certainly made a difference.
Well, I appreciate that. It is way past due. The road was flooded again earlier in the week and last week and probably the week before, and somebody's going to have a wreck there if it's not fixed pretty soon. So,
I've told Rodney,
for your work.
Joey Hopkins, our District 5 engineer, is going to be here for the work session.
Is he?
He said, and I asked him, I said, just come and answer all their questions. He said he shouldn't need no more than 15, 20 minutes. He'll be here at the work
He's
session.
optimistic, isn't he?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And Councilmember Behringer, you mentioned Mr. Mota, is that how you?
Mr. Robert, I think it was Robert Moda.
Mota?
Uh-huh.
And his property, or where he was reported some issues, may be more downstream from this area.
Right.
So I'm not sure how much this is going to help the situations he's been talking about. I just wanted to
I
relay
understand
that.
that. I'm thinking that perhaps just understanding that some attention is being paid in that general neighborhood would certainly make him feel better.
All right.
The second one was just a sort of a minor update on some of the issues that were raised by council about the Garner Mountain Senior High. We've had some previous discussions about the use of no-mow grasses, and then also more recently, Mr. Singleton had communicated with us about the general condition of regular grasses on the campus. The inspection staff were planning today to cite them just like they do anyone else with tall grass. I don't know if the citation happened before this happened, but Mr. Beasley reported to me late today that there had been a crew out weed eating and trimming, and so I didn't see the condition it was left in, but my hope is that did get some of the campus cleaned up. The real thing I was going to report to you, though, is that I do have a meeting with the Senior Director of Facilities on Thursday, and in addition to the condition of grass, the use of the no-mow grass, there's also an issue that I'm bringing to them on behalf of police. There's a repeater device that is helpful for police radios to be able to communicate better if it's located within schools, and one was not installed in time to South Garner High School to open, and a pledge was made then to make sure it was for this school to reopen, and that timeline is looking like that's slipping. So in addition to the concerns council had, there's also one from the police chief that we'll be talking to the facilities director on Thursday, and so I'll update you after that. If there's anything of note to update you on prior to next week's meeting, I'll update you on that.
And I believe there was a question, at least I raised it one time, about the intersection at Creech Road and Garner Road and restriping the lanes so that there's more visibility and more room to actually make turns.
Yes, ma'am. And so we heard back from DOT. We were hoping to get the actual letter from them that described it in greater detail, but we have not received that, so we wanted to go ahead and give you the update that we received from them. DOT has gone out and looked at that situation, and they are not wanting to remove the turn lane off of Creech Road. There was some discussion about whether or not using the turn lane of Creech Road would allow more capacity, but what they do want to do is, with some signalization improvements or changes that are going to be made soon, they want to restripe that so that the stop bar on Garner Road turning onto Creech Road, so eastbound Garner Road turning onto Creech Road, you would stop further back. So you would stop further before Ms. Cash's house, so that traffic turning from Creech Road onto westbound Garner Road had more turn room.
What about traffic turning right onto Creech Road from East Garner Road and continually going over the curb, and there's just mud all over the place and the curb is going to be broken before too long, but school buses cannot make that turn without driving over the curb.
So I think that what we can ask them, and they didn't specifically direct that, but we could also look at the stop bar on Creech Road to see if it's as far back as it can be, to sort of the same improvement, but reverse it a little bit and allow buses there. So we'll get Mr. Ham to talk to them about when they're doing that, to look at the movement of that one as well.
I have one more request about the Creech Road intersection. If we could have the police to be out there at 7:30, 7:45 in the morning, 8 o'clock, and count the number of cars that fly through the red lights there on Garner Road. Not just yellow lights, but don't even slow up for the red ones.
That's all I have, Mr. Dickerson.
All right, thanks, Mr. Hodges. That concludes the manager's reports.
Mr. Attorney, you got something later, right?
Yes, sir. Closed session. I can give the number now if y'all are ready. NCGS 143-318-1186.
All right, let's start with Ken. Got anything?
I have nothing to report tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Yes, sir. I attended the Garner Ed Foundation meeting last week, and they acknowledged receipt of the money that the town has granted them. They had a question there. They had asked for $12,000 and received 10. And would you refresh me on why that amount was lower than the request? It's the first time that's happened.
Well, I think what we did with pretty much all of the agency fundings is they received the same amount that they had received in the previous year, is what my understanding is, but I would have to look.
I think they got less than in the previous year. If you would check on that, that was brought up in the meeting that it was not what they'd received in the past. And the next thing is I plan to attend the League of Municipalities conference in September. It's going to be in Hickory, and looking forward to that. And I wonder if anyone else besides me is going.
I'll try to.
I have made some intimations that I might try to attend. I haven't gotten with Stella or anybody yet on that.
Staff, anyone from staff going? I think that would be important.
It just happens to be the same week as ICMA conference. And, I was trying to be cautious not to be out of town the whole week, but, it's something, if council wants me to look at that, I can.
We'll
but
cover
I
them.
will be there, and there's some overlap too. Well,
I understand.
I know, we'll cover you, we'll do what we can for you.
Well, Sam's going, that'll be helpful too. That's all, sir.
Jackie, you have anything? Right.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll follow up with what Mr. Hodges said in regards to the grass situation, lawn situation at Garner Magna High School. I expressed my frustration with it in an email and met with, last week with me and Ms. Behringer met with John, Matt, Rodney, also Tony Beasley and Doug Garner from enforcement. I think Stella was there also, keeping notes and keeping us straight. And we learned more about no more grass than I think we knew before, and how it was on the site plan approved in 2015 that I don't know if all of us are quite aware of what it was. Mr. Triesenberg was there also, excuse me. He brought the site plan, and there are places where there are no mow grass or low maintenance or no maintenance grass. This is what the intention is. It's also planted in places on the site plan where it clearly says there's supposed to be turf. So it was put in places it's not supposed to be. It's put in other places to be what it is lower no maintenance. One of my biggest concerns with this lower no maintenance grass is going to grow over 12 inches tall. It's because it's no maintenance. It's when other things grow in it, trees, weeds, and so forth. Because, to put it kindly, the school system is challenged with how they maintain all their facilities as it is. I was at the football game last Friday. I had numerous people ask me about the grass situation, as I had the week before, from not only members of the staff at the high school, but also members of the Trojan Club. I heard it this weekend. I heard it again Monday morning. I went by and looked Monday morning and saw that not only is the no-mow grass tall, which is supposed to be, all the grass was tall. God awful ugly for a school that's getting ready to open. And invited to have their, this afternoon at 5 o'clock, had the students come by to take a tour of the school, because my two youngest went. So the frustration, I think, that all of us may have heard or seen out there is it's a beautiful new school, but getting cooperation from the school system can be challenging, and that's putting it kindly. I think with what John just reported in regards to the police, the hardware that they want to have out there, what did you call it, a repeater? Yes, sir. Not getting in the school is typical of the lack of cooperation and communication the school system has, because I can tell you what the Trojan Club said they were told what was going to be done and not done, not only at this high school, but at South Garner. And it is a very, very poor communication and follow through with the high school, the school system, just in general. It's just extremely poor. Tell you one thing, don't do one thing, have to come back and do this, that, and the other. It's extremely frustrating. That's why people are frustrated in dealing with the school system, among many other issues. But it's a good-looking school. But I think something that has already been brought up that staff can bring to us in the very near future is either looking at the use of these no-mow grasses and eliminating them or not allowing them, because the school system tried to build in other towns. One town had no ordinance against them, but it also said all grass would be well maintained and cut and not exceed 12 inches, which no-mow grass would do. So that eliminates that from there. And there were some other areas that did allow it in certain areas, a 3-to-1 ratio. I don't know if we want even to get into that. Maybe other. We'll see what staff brings us, but it's an issue that has had to be addressed, because I don't think people want grass 18 inches high at our. I don't think we would like to have it planted in front of town hall. Now we do have some bare spots out there that haven't come in yet, but I don't think that's going to be our solution. Is to put that out there. Send a retention pond to help absorb moisture and some of the water and so forth that it can do. I think people would understand that, but being on the front of a high school on Spring Drive right there, that's not what the intent was. So that's happened, and we'll move forward. We heard from Mr. Robinson tonight about potential increase in interest rates. Our next bond sale is sometime next month, correct? So we're going to probably.
No, it's this month.
Okay, so
Just
good.
happened.
We'll be ahead of any potential changes in interest rates, so that's good, even though the market may be trending that way, so that's good.
We did it this month, and Pam can give you an update on how that went.
So it's already happened? I know we moved.
The sale happened last Tuesday is the 14th, whatever day that was, I'm sorry. But our interest rate, we had 8 bidders, I believe, and the interest rate came back at 3.066%, which was really good. We're closing on the sale next week.
Right.
So the sale actually happens next week, but the bids came in last week.
Who was the low bidder?
Pardon me?
Who was the low bidder? What bank?
It is Robert W. Baird, B-A-I-R-D.
Very good, that's good to me, good news, thank you. Also, I sent an email to the staff, and I'll just mention it here. I wanted to find out what the status of the crosswalk signage and improvements were for the intersection of Averysboro and Buffalo Road, and also for the intersection of Timber Drive and Buckingham. And we're going to have some crosswalk signage posted in, also some additional crosswalk on the roadway. So, it seemed like we talked about this 6 months ago, and I thought it was going to be installed in 3 months, but we had to get some encroachment agreements from DOT, so I'm just wanting to know where we stand on that. I'd like to find out on that as soon as possible, because some people have asked me. I thought this was going to be in by now, and I did too, so just want to find out the status of that.
And I believe we have the material at Public Works.
Did you get a response, Mr. Singleton?
Not yet, but I hadn't checked my emails since I've been here. I hadn't checked my emails.
The materials have arrived, and when I checked with Mr. Ham last week or the end of the week before, he was coordinating with the manufacturer who would come out and give assistance to Public Works to do the install. So materials have been received.
So good. So hopefully in the very near future, we'll see that installed. Okay, good to hear. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Very well, thank you. Earlier today, Ken and I met with staff and with the Garner Fire and Rescue on resuming our meetings regarding the MOU. It was a good discussion today. Matt presented some benchmarking results comparing us with some other municipalities, and it was kind of information that he told us that Ms. Behringer had recommended when he presented it to the fire department. She suggested that this might be something good for council, and that's one of the things we talked about, and of having that presentation, and that'll be forthcoming. It's not important right now when that's going to be, but you'll Jackie and Greg will get to see that, and Ronnie. But that's it's some. The data is one thing, and who we're compared with is another, which is real interesting and kind of, I'll say, uplifting. By the same token, Public Works Committee will be meeting a week from tomorrow morning. It'll be somewhat of a follow-up from parts of things that's on the agenda next Tuesday night at the work session. And the past week, I've talked with Judy Bass, representing the Historic Preservation Group. Had a good discussion that covered a range of just some background information. Ultimately, she wants her group to be able to come back and make a presentation to council in the very near future, and I think they're working on that, and she knows better than anybody how to get on the agenda, so I encourage her to do so. So we will be expecting a presentation from them in the near future to hear updates from us, but primarily for them to give us updates and try to plan about moving. What are the next steps? There's a construction site for some townhomes, I'm assuming, or townhouses on Averysboro Road, in that cutout section in the vicinity of, I reckon it's Georgetown, I'm not sure. But I was talking with George Rucker end of last week, and he's going to provide me a sketch that he anticipates there may be some drainage issues on the northwest corner. When I get that, I'll bring it to whoever is the right person to bring it to, John, I suppose you. But I'd like somebody to look at that. It may take some, if somebody would give a second look at that and try to calm some nerves there. I don't think George owns the property. I think he's really speaking on behalf of somebody else that's going to be the greatest impact, somebody off-site. The last thing, and I don't think I'm telling you anything new, is that my wife seems to be more interested than I am, and that it's now at least 3 times every 2 weeks we're going by the Amazon site, and if you haven't been by there in the last 3 or 4 days, you've missed something. But I have never seen so much activity on one piece of property. But that's at your earliest convenience, go by there, and I think you'll see people working morning, noon, and night and weekends. It's amazing, but it's really encouraging.
If I could add to that, Mr. Kennedy, there's interest from people all over. I took my grandchildren out there last week to show them something new and exciting, and they said, "We've already seen it, Grandma. Dad brought us by here."
I think I mentioned that, yeah, I mean, I've been by there several times, but that at least one of the superintendents that I talked to when I was out there, I don't know if it's there now, but he said, you know, there'll be 600 some workers out here working on this site here as the thing progresses. That's a pretty big workforce to engage at a place like that.
Maybe you need to get them up there on the recreation center.
And get that contractor inspired by them.
There you go.
It'll be a race to the finish. Which will open first, Amazon or the rec center? And I say that sarcastically and say it half seriously.
And that's
Sadly.
all I have to report for tonight.
Okay, time to go to closed session.
We have a 10-minute recess before
I
that.
will take a 10-minute break.